We all enjoy pointing fingers at experts when they make mistakes. Popular channels love to publish hack lists of embarrassingly wrong predictions by famous people, complete with a snappy image and a dump truck of condescension. It's understandable seeing someone successful make obvious errors of judgment helps us feel better about our own bloopers. Yet, in our eagerness to point out their blunders, we often end up getting it very wrong, and in the video today, we're looking at 10 cases of that happening. Number 10. We can close the book on infectious diseases. So, what allegedly happened? William H. Stewart was US Surgeon General from 1965 to 1969. He is the man responsible for those cheerful warning labels that you see on packs of cigarettes. In 1969, he supposedly made the above statement to US Congress. His claim was soon disproved by the emergence of AIDS and other virulent diseases. Even William's 2008 obituary mentions the criticism he received because of his optimistic prediction. So, what actually happened? William, he never spoke those words. Two authors performed a rigorous search for the primary source of this quote, and they failed to find anything. More than that, secondary sources disagree on the date of the alleged statement, saying it could have been 1967 or maybe 1969. There is only a single book that points to the primary source of the quote. The book claims that it comes from a speech William gave in 1967 at the 65th annual meeting of the Association of State and Territorial Health Officers. But guess what? That speech contains no such quote at all. Not only that, but in the same speech, William actually said this: "Warning flags are still flying in the communicable diseases field. While we are engaged in taking on new duties, we cannot and must not lose sight of our traditional program responsibilities." So that doesn't exactly sound like a man closing the books on infectious diseases, does it? Number 9. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered a means of communication. Allegedly, what happened is this. In 1876, William Orton, the president of Western Union, was offered to buy a patent from a man you may have heard of, and that would be Alexander Graham Bell. The patent, that's a little invention known as the telephone. William Orton's response was apparently that short-sighted quote I read in the title. How could it be that William Orton didn't immediately see the potential in this technology? What actually happened is this, and that's that he totally did see the potential, he just didn't want to pay for Bell's version. In fact, what William Orton likely said was, "This electric toy has too many shortcomings." He was trying to downplay the importance of specifically Bell's invention, not the idea of the telephone as a whole. How do we know this? Well, because in less than a year, Orton had started another company, American Speaking Telephone, to develop his own version of the device. What's more, Orton's telephone even ended up being superior to Bell's. Aggressive market competition followed, culminating in a court case. This court case was apparently to do with Orton supposedly stealing Bell's idea. It ended in 1879 with Western Union giving up the telephone business. More importantly, all of Western Union's telephone patents were assigned to Bell Company. We bet William Orton wished he had just bought Bell's patent in the first place. Number 8. Computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. So what allegedly happened? This chuckle-worthy quote comes from an old Popular Mechanics magazine. The quote then found its way into many compilations of bad predictions. Anyone watching this on a smartphone can only laugh at the hilariously conservative estimate. But what actually happened? Well, this quote is from an issue of March 1949. This was only 2 short years before the first general-purpose computer was launched. It was a little thing called the ENIAC, and it weighed 30 tons. Popular Mechanics were making their prediction within the specific technological framework. In fact, here's the full quote. "Where a calculator like ENIAC today is equipped with 18,000 vacuum tubes and weighs 30 tons, computers in the future may have only 1,000 vacuum tubes and perhaps weigh only 1.5 tons. To be fair though, Popular Mechanics did fail to anticipate revolutionary inventions like transistors and microchips. But even so, their prediction still stood the test of time almost 10 years later. In 1957, the IBM 608 came out. This was the first transistor-based computer, and its weight, well, that was 1.2 tons. In the rapidly evolving computer industry, this prediction isn't quite the laughable gaffe that we now make it out to be. Number 7. Fooling around with alternating current is just a waste of time. Nobody will use it, ever. What allegedly happens? This 1889 quote is brought to you courtesy of Thomas Edison, one of the most well-known American inventors. It's enough to look at almost any electrical appliance in your home to discover how wrong his prediction was. Nowadays, alternating current AC is exactly what delivers electricity to households, yet Edison called it a waste of time. Whoops-a-daisy. But what actually happened is this. Edison's words are far from a genuine attempt at predicting the future. If anything, they were the desperate cry of a man personally threatened by the invention of AC. You see, Edison was earning money on his own invention, the direct current DC option. Any progress on the AC front was automatically bad news for Edison. Thus, Edison stopped at nothing to undermine and discredit AC. He lobbied the US government to ban it. He went to great lengths to portray AC as dangerous. He even staged public AC electrocutions of animals, including a freaking elephant. Unfortunately for Edison, AC won the ensuing war of the currents and became the main method of distributing electricity. Seen in that light, Edison's words are no more than a failed smear campaign. They are the equivalent of Sony claiming that the Xbox lost the console war. Number 6. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. What allegedly happens? This 1943 quote is attributed to Thomas J. Watson, who was the chairman and CEO of IBM. It's a pretty strange quote from a man whose company would eventually become one of the leading computer manufacturers in the world. Was Watson ill when he said something so bafflingly wrong? No, he wasn't, so here's what actually happens. Watson never actually said anything like that. The quote is not mentioned by any major newspapers or magazines. There are no speeches, there's no notes from meetings, there's no indication that he ever even entertains the idea. The attribution first appeared in 1986 when a Usenet poster used the alleged quote as his signature. However, an earlier Usenet discussion points at these words having nothing to do with Watson. Instead, a similar sentiment was supposedly expressed by a Cambridge professor, Douglas Hartree, in 1951. It's not certain whether Hartree indeed said something along those lines, but notably, even if he did, he was talking about the first large, very specialized computers that he himself developed. They were to modern PCs what Godzilla is to the pet lizard. Suddenly, his market size estimate sounds a lot less off base. Number 5. There is nothing new to be discovered in physics now. All that remains is more and more precise measurement. What was allegedly said? Lord Absolute Zero Kelvin is said to have spoken these words in 1900 to a bunch of physicists at the British Association for the Advancement of Science, no less. That's not an audience you want to make such an obvious blooper in front of, is it? So what actually happened? The quote is disputed. There are no primary sources documenting Kelvin's words. Even some people who have previously used this quote as an example are questioning its origin. More importantly, in the same year as he supposedly made the wrong prediction, Kelvin spoke about 2 clouds on the horizon of theoretical physics. These clouds were eventually addressed by the emergence of revolutionary ideas like quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. So it appears Lord Kelvin was just a tad more open-minded about new possibilities than his alleged statement would have us believe. Number 4. There is no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. Allegedly, this was said in 1977 by Ken Olsen, the founder, president, and chairman of Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. DEC was a major player in the computer industry and the first company to introduce a mini-computer to the market. How foolish it was of Ken to dismiss a huge potential market for personal computers when his own company was busy developing computer equipment. So what actually happened? Well, it turns out Ken Olsen did actually say something like that, but he wasn't talking about PCs. He was referring to a central computer controlling things at home. That's right, he was essentially describing the dangers of HAL 9000. Olsen was actually exasperated over what he felt was a ridiculous interpretation of his words. He stressed that at the time of the quote, his whole family was already using the equivalents of personal computers. So, did Ken wrongly predict the future importance of personal computers? Most probably not. Did 2001: A Space Odyssey make him a little paranoid? Well, quite possibly. Number 3. Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Allegedly, Harry Warner of Warner Brothers spoke these words in 1926. How strange to see such a lack of foresight from the co-founder of such a huge movie studio. I mean, really, Harry? You'd rather have movies stay silent forever? So what actually happens? Well, Harry was actually being a shrewd businessman, and that's revealed through his full quote. Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? The music. That's the big plus about this. Harry was not dismissing the use of sound in movies. He was, however, suggesting to use it for music as first priority. In the silent era, movie studios employed musicians to provide live accompaniment to films. By canning the music, Warner Brothers could spare the musicians' salaries, which would be a significant cost cut. On top of that, prior attempts at making talking films had flopped, so Harry was naturally being cautious. It also didn't help that actors of the era were hired for their looks, and many had terrible voices. Anyone who heard Pierce Brosnan sing in Mamma Mia may look more kindly upon Harry Warner. Number 2. 640k ought to be enough for everybody. What allegedly happened? This 1981 quote comes from none other than Bill Gates himself, referring to the amount of usable RAM a user might need. For a man who started the Microsoft powerhouse and one of the richest people alive, he sure was laughably mistaken, right? So what actually happened? This quote seems to be an urban legend. Bill Gates himself, while admitting many past errors of judgment, denies ever saying it. Nobody can identify the true origin of the quote. We do know that Bill Gates was responsible for the optimistic prediction of eradicating spam by 2006, and if you check your mailbox, you'll see that he got that one wrong. However, the specific 640k quote is just a myth that manages to get Bill Gates really fired up. And, well, maybe that's why people keep bringing it up. Number 1. Everything that can be invented has been invented. So what allegedly happened? Well, Charles H. Dewar was the first commissioner of the US Patent Office, and in 1899 he definitively concluded that people were just about done with the whole inventing new stuff thing. Soon afterwards, the 20th century rolled around and proved him wrong by giving us things like human flight. As the man in charge of the US Patent Office, Dewar should really have known better, right? So what actually happened? Well, he totally knew better. In fact, he was convinced that the inventions of the 20th century would dwarf all prior progress. So now you might be wondering, well, why would he say something so stupid? Well, the answer, as you might have guessed, is that he didn't. A librarian named Samuel Sass set out to find the original source of the alleged quote. He concluded that far from pressing the brakes on innovation, Dewar actually lobbied for improvements to the US patent system to encourage potential inventors. So now we need to address where the quote comes from. Sass suggests that it surfaced as a result of an 1843 report by Henry L. Ellsworth, the Patent Office Commissioner at the time. Henry used a bit of rhetorical flourish to emphasize that the number of patents was growing at a great rate. At some point, his words were taken out of context, misquoted, and then wrongly attributed to Dewar. Authors Cerf and Navasky were behind a 1984 book, The Experts Speak, which repeated and popularized the misattributed quote. This is what Sass had to say about them. Evidently, it did not occur to Cerf and Navasky to question that statement. They simply copied it from the earlier book. One can expect that in the future there will be more such copying because it is easier than checking the facts. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below and don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. And if you're looking for something else to watch right now, why not check out some of our other videos that are linked to on the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.